The Sheikh billionaire laughed at her mistake. Then she translated his hidden Arabic message and froze the whole palace. Emma Carter wiped down the marble table for the third time that evening, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the gold-rimmed plates at the Golden Crescent, Manhattan's most exclusive Arabic fine dining restaurant. At 26, she had perfected the art of invisibility, moving through the opulent space like a shadow among the crystal chandeliers and silk tapestries imported. Directly from Dubai, her simple black uniform and pulled-back chestnut hair made her blend into the background, exactly where she wanted to be. But tonight would shatter that carefully constructed anonymity forever. The restaurant manager, Mr. Hassan, rushed through the kitchen doors, his face flushed with excitement and anxiety. "Everyone, listen up. Sheikh Khalid al-Rashid is arriving in 15 minutes, with a party of 15 guests. This is a diplomatic dinner of the highest importance. I need absolute perfection tonight." Emma's stomach tightened. She had heard of Sheikh Khalid, who hadn't. The 48-year-old oil and investment magnate was worth an estimated $8.7 billion, controlled vast territories of influence across the Middle East, and was known for his ruthless business tactics and impossibly high standards. When the massive oak doors swung open, the entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Sheikh Khalid entered like a force of nature, his presence commanding immediate attention. He wore a pristine white thobe that seemed to glow against his olive skin, a black bisht embroidered with gold thread draped over his broad shoulders, and a perfectly arranged white gutra, held in place by a golden agle. His dark eyes, sharp as obsidian, scanned the room with the calculating gaze of a man who missed nothing. Behind him, his entourage filed in, advisors in expensive suits, 2 women in elegant abayas, and 4 security personnel whose eyes never stopped moving. Emma was assigned to the main table. As she approached with the wine list, her heart hammered against her ribs. She had spent 2 years perfecting the art of being unremarkable, of hiding the brilliant mind that once earned her a full scholarship to MIT and a groundbreaking thesis in computational linguistics. That life was dead now, buried under betrayal and stolen dreams. This was her reality, serving the wealthy while her own potential gathered dust. "Good evening, Your Excellency," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "May I present tonight's selection of—" Sheikh Khalid didn't even glance at her. He was deep in conversation with the man to his right, a silver-haired American in a navy suit, who Emma recognized from news broadcasts, Senator Richard Blackwood, chair of the Foreign Relations Committee. The Sheikh's dismissal was complete, as if she were merely another piece of furniture in the lavish room. As the evening progressed, Emma moved through her duties with mechanical precision. When she presented the appetizer, samak mashwi with tahini and pomegranate, she attempted to pronounce the dish in Arabic, wanting to show respect for the cuisine. "Samak mashwi," she said, her accent slightly off, the emphasis on the wrong syllable. The Sheikh's head snapped up, and for the first time he looked directly at her. Then he laughed, a sharp mocking sound that cut through the ambient music. He turned to his guests and spoke in rapid Arabic, his tone dripping with condescension. "Did you hear that? These Americans, they try so hard to impress us with their broken Arabic. It's like watching a child stumble through a language they'll never truly understand. How amusing that they think a few mispronounced words will earn our respect." His companions chuckled politely, and Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. She lowered her eyes and stepped back, playing the part of the embarrassed, ignorant waitress perfectly. But inside, her mind was racing. She had understood every word, every syllable of his Gulf Arabic dialect, with its distinctive pronunciation and formal structure. The MIT linguistics program hadn't just taught her languages, it had given her the tools to master them at a level few Westerners ever achieved. Her thesis on AI-driven translation of Arabic dialects had required her to become fluent in 7 regional variations, to understand not just words but cultural context, historical nuance, and social hierarchy embedded in every phrase. As the main course was served, slow-roasted lamb with saffron rice and roasted vegetables, the conversation at the Sheikh's table grew more intense. Emma refilled water glasses, her movements slow and deliberate, her ears capturing every word. The Sheikh leaned toward Senator Blackwood, his voice dropping to a near whisper, switching from Gulf Arabic to a more obscure Levantine dialect. The transaction we discussed, $340 million, will be processed through the Cyprus accounts as agreed. The arms deal will appear as agricultural equipment on all official documents. Your 20% commission will be transferred to the Cayman structure within 72 hours of confirmation. Emma's hand froze mid-pour. The water glass trembled slightly, a single drop spilling onto the pristine white tablecloth. It was barely noticeable, but in that split second her face betrayed her. Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly, her lips parted in shock, her breath caught in her throat. She understood. She understood everything. An illegal arms deal disguised as agricultural equipment, money laundering through offshore accounts, a United States senator taking bribes from a foreign power. Sheikh Khalid's eyes locked onto her face. The change in his expression was subtle but unmistakable, the casual arrogance replaced by sharp, predatory focus. He had seen her reaction. He knew. The realization passed between them in a heartbeat, a silent acknowledgement that shattered the invisible barrier between the powerful and the powerless. Emma quickly composed herself, setting down the water pitcher with steady hands, but it was too late. The Sheikh's gaze followed her as she retreated toward the kitchen, his mind clearly working through the implications of what had just occurred. In the kitchen, Emma leaned against the cold stainless steel counter, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. What had she just witnessed? And more terrifyingly, what would happen now that the Sheikh knew she understood? She had spent 2 years hiding, protecting herself from a world that had already destroyed her once. But in that single moment of lost composure, she had exposed herself to one of the most powerful and dangerous men in the world. As she forced herself to return to the dining room with the dessert course, Emma Carter had no idea that her life was about to change, in ways she could never have imagined. The Sheikh was still watching her, and behind his calculating gaze, wheels were already turning. The rest of the dinner service passed in agonizing slow motion. Emma moved through her duties with robotic precision, avoiding direct eye contact with the Sheikh's table, while feeling his gaze burn into her back every time she turned away. The dessert, delicate rose-water panna cotta with pistachios and gold leaf, was served without incident, but the tension in her shoulders refused to release. When the Sheikh's party finally rose to leave, nearly 3 hours after they had arrived, Emma allowed herself a small breath of relief. Perhaps he would simply leave. Perhaps she had imagined the intensity of his scrutiny, but as the entourage moved toward the exit, Sheikh Khalid paused. He turned back, his eyes scanning the restaurant until they found her standing near the kitchen entrance. He said something in Arabic to the tall, broad-shouldered man beside him, clearly head of security, who nodded and approached her. "Miss," the security guard said in accented English, his voice professional but firm, "Sheikh Khalid requests that you remain available. Someone will contact the restaurant management regarding you." Emma's blood ran cold. I don't understand. Did I do something wrong?" The guard's expression revealed nothing. "Just remain available." Then he was gone, following his employer out into the Manhattan night, where a convoy of black Mercedes SUVs waited at the curb. Emma stood frozen, her mind spinning through possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Did he think she would report what she heard? Was he going to threaten her? Silence her? Her hands began to shake again, and this time she couldn't stop them. Mr. Hassan appeared at her elbow, his eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and concern. "Emma, what did the Sheikh's man say to you? Did something happen?" She forced her voice to remain steady. "He just said someone would contact you about me. I'm not sure why." The manager's face lit up with an expression she couldn't quite read. "This is extraordinary. In 30 years of running this restaurant, I've never had a guest of that caliber take personal interest in staff. You must have impressed him somehow. This could be very good for you, Emma, very good indeed." But Emma knew better. She had seen the look in the Sheikh's eyes. It wasn't admiration or benign interest. It was the look of a chess player who had just discovered an unexpected piece on the board, one that could either be useful or dangerous. She needed to be very, very careful. That night, Emma barely slept in her tiny studio apartment in Queens. She lay in the darkness, staring at the water-stained ceiling, replaying every moment of the evening. The illegal conversation she had overheard played on a loop in her mind, $340 million. Arms deal. Senator Blackwood. Cyprus accounts. Cayman Islands. 20% commission. She knew things that could destroy powerful people, and powerful people didn't let loose ends remain loose. By morning, Emma had made a decision. She would act as if nothing had happened. She would go to work, serve tables, and if anyone asked, she would claim she understood nothing, that her Arabic was limited to menu items and basic pleasantries. It was the only way to survive. But even as she made this resolution, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered that it was already too late. Sheikh Khalid al-Rashid had seen through her disguise, and men like him didn't simply forget. 3 days passed without incident. Emma began to relax, convincing herself that perhaps the Sheikh had decided she wasn't worth his attention after all. She fell back into her routine, morning shifts at the Golden Crescent, evening study sessions where she secretly worked on updating her old research, and lonely nights in her apartment where she tried not to think about the life she had lost. Dr. Marcus Webb, her former fiancé and research partner, had stolen her thesis on AI-driven Arabic dialect translation 2 years ago. He had published it under his own name, received accolades from the academic community, secured a position at Columbia University, and launched a successful tech startup worth over $50 million. All built on her work, her ideas, her sleepless nights and brilliant insights. When Emma had tried to fight back, Marcus had been ruthless. He had connections, money, and a silver tongue that convinced everyone she was a bitter ex-girlfriend trying to steal credit for his genius. Her reputation was destroyed before she could even defend herself. No university would hire her. No research institution would return her calls. She had been erased from the academic world as thoroughly as if she had never existed. So she had disappeared into the service industry, taking a job where her mind could rest and her heart could slowly heal. Or so she had hoped. On the 4th day after the Sheikh's visit, everything changed. Emma was in the middle of lunch service when Mr. Hassan called her into his office. His expression was unreadable, somewhere between awe and nervousness. "Emma, sit down, please." She perched on the edge of the chair, her stomach knotting with anxiety. "Am I in trouble?" Hassan shook his head slowly. "No, not trouble. But I received a very unusual call this morning from the office of Sheikh Khalid al-Rashid." Emma's heart stopped. What did they want? The manager pulled out a thick cream-colored envelope with a gold seal. "They want you to attend a private dinner at the Sheikh's Manhattan residence tomorrow evening. 8 o'clock. A car will pick you up from your apartment." He slid the envelope across the desk. "The address is inside, along with a dress code and this." He opened the envelope to reveal a black credit card with no name, just a number. "You're to purchase appropriate attire for the evening. There's $50,000 on this card." Emma stared at the card as if it were a venomous snake. "I don't understand. Why would he want me at a private dinner? I'm just a waitress." Hassan leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Emma, I don't know what happened that night, but Sheikh Khalid doesn't extend invitations like this casually. This is either a tremendous opportunity or—" He trailed off, but the unspoken warning hung in the air. Or something very dangerous. Emma picked up the card with trembling fingers. "What if I refuse?" The manager's expression turned grave. "Men like Sheikh Khalid al-Rashid don't accept refusal. If you don't go, he'll find other ways to get what he wants. At least this way, you walk in through the front door." That evening, Emma stood in front of the mirror in a midtown boutique, barely recognizing herself. The sales associate had selected a floor-length gown in deep emerald silk that hugged her curves before flowing elegantly to the floor. The neckline was modest but sophisticated, and the fabric seemed to shimmer with every movement. Her hair had been professionally styled in soft waves, and subtle makeup enhanced her features without overwhelming them. She looked like someone who belonged in the Sheikh's world, but inside, she was still the frightened girl who had lost everything and was desperately trying to survive. The next evening, a black Mercedes arrived at her apartment building exactly at 7:30. The driver, a silent man in a dark suit, held the door open without speaking. The drive to the Sheikh's Manhattan residence took 20 minutes, winding through the Upper East Side until they stopped in front of a stunning limestone townhouse that occupied an entire block between 5th and Madison Avenues. The building was 5 stories of architectural perfection, with ornate ironwork balconies and windows that glowed with warm golden light. Emma was escorted through a marble foyer where a crystal chandelier the size of a small car hung from the ceiling, past rooms filled with priceless art and antique furniture, and finally into an intimate dining room on the third floor. The space was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park. The table was set for two with china so delicate it seemed translucent, and soft instrumental music played from hidden speakers. And there, standing by the window with a glass of amber liquid in his hand, was Sheikh Khalid al-Rashid. He had traded his traditional attire for a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than Emma made in a year, but his presence was no less commanding. When he turned to face her, his dark eyes swept over her appearance with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Miss Carter," he said, his English perfect with just a hint of an accent that made every word sound deliberate. "Thank you for accepting my invitation. Please sit." Emma moved to the chair he indicated, her legs feeling unsteady. "Your Excellency, I'm not sure why I'm here." The Sheikh took the seat across from her, setting down his glass with precise care. "You're here because you're an enigma, Miss Carter. And I don't like enigmas in my vicinity." He leaned back, his gaze never leaving her face. "You're a waitress at the Golden Crescent, 26 years old. You live alone in Queens. You have no social media presence, no digital footprint beyond the basics. You appear to be exactly what you seem, unremarkable, invisible, ordinary." He paused and his voice dropped to a dangerous softness. "Except you're not ordinary at all, are you?" Emma's mouth went dry. "I don't know what you mean." Sheikh Khalid smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Don't insult my intelligence. 4 nights ago you understood every word I said in Arabic. Not just understood. You comprehended the nuances, the implications, the context. Your face betrayed you for exactly 2 seconds, but those 2 seconds told me everything I needed to know." He pulled out a tablet and slid it across the table. "So I had you investigated, and what I found was fascinating." Emma looked down at the screen. Her heart sank as she saw her own face staring back at her, a photo from 3 years ago when she had been a different person. The document was thorough. Her full academic record from MIT, her thesis title, her publications, her awards, and then the darker chapters, the accusations from Marcus Webb, the destroyed reputation, the disappearance from academic life. "You were brilliant," the Sheikh said quietly, "a prodigy in computational linguistics. Your thesis on AI-driven translation of Arabic dialects was revolutionary. It should have launched a spectacular career." His eyes hardened. "Instead, it was stolen by Dr. Marcus Webb, who is now celebrated as a genius while you serve tables." Tears burned behind Emma's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Why does any of this matter to you?" Sheikh Khalid stood and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "Because I despise injustice. Because I recognize brilliance when I see it. And because you heard something 4 nights ago that makes you either a threat or an asset." He turned back to face her. "So I'm going to make you an offer, Miss Carter. Work for me. Use that extraordinary mind of yours in my service. I have business interests that span 40 countries and require linguistic expertise that goes far beyond simple translation. I need someone who understands cultural context, political nuance, and can navigate the complexities of Middle Eastern dialects with native-level fluency." Emma stared at him in disbelief. "You want to hire me?" "After I overheard your illegal conversation with Senator Blackwood?" The Sheikh's expression didn't change. "That conversation never happened, and if you're wise, you'll forget you ever heard it. But yes, I want to hire you. $500,000 a year to start. Full benefits and the resources to rebuild your academic reputation. I have connections at every major university in the world. 1 phone call from me, and doors that were slammed in your face will open again." It was too much. Too perfect. Too dangerous. "And if I refuse?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sheikh Khalid returned to his seat, his eyes locked on hers. "Then you go back to your life and we never speak again. But you'll always wonder what could have been. You'll serve tables and watch your potential wither away, while the man who destroyed you continues to profit from your work." He leaned forward. "Or you can take back your power. You can show the world who you really are. You can have justice." The word hung in the air between them like a promise and a threat. Justice. It was what Emma had dreamed of for 2 years, what she had given up hope of ever achieving. And now this dangerous, powerful man was offering it to her on a silver platter. But what would it cost? What would she have to become to accept his offer? As if reading her thoughts, Sheikh Khalid spoke again, his voice softer now. "I'm not asking you to compromise your integrity, Miss Carter. I'm asking you to use your gifts for something meaningful, to stop hiding and start living again." Emma looked into his eyes and saw something unexpected, not just calculation and power, but a flicker of genuine respect, perhaps even understanding. He knew what it was like to be underestimated, to have people see only the surface and miss the depths beneath. In that moment, she made a decision that would change everything. "I'll do it," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "But I have conditions. I want a contract that protects me legally. I want transparency about what you expect from me. And I want your word that you'll help me expose Marcus Webb for what he really is." The Sheikh's smile was genuine this time, transforming his severe features into something almost warm. "You have courage, Miss Carter. I respect that. You'll have your contract, your transparency, and my full support in bringing down Dr. Webb." He extended his hand across the table. "Welcome to my organization. I think this is the beginning of a very interesting partnership." As Emma shook his hand, feeling the strength and warmth of his grip, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just made a deal with the devil. But perhaps, she thought, sometimes you needed the devil on your side to defeat the demons of your past. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind that left Emma's head spinning. Sheikh Khalid's organization moved with ruthless efficiency. Within 48 hours, she had signed a comprehensive employment contract reviewed by 3 different lawyers, received a signing bonus of $100,000, and been moved from her cramped Queens studio to a luxury apartment in a doorman building overlooking the East River. The apartment alone would have cost $15,000 a month to rent, but it was provided as part of her compensation package, fully furnished with elegant modern furniture and a home office equipped with state-of-the-art technology. Her official title was Senior Linguistic Consultant, but the reality of her work was far more complex and fascinating than she had imagined. Emma found herself analyzing business contracts in Arabic, Farsi, and Turkish, identifying subtle linguistic cues that revealed hidden intentions or cultural misunderstandings. She attended high-level meetings via video conference, providing real-time translation and cultural context for negotiations spanning from Dubai to Doha to Riyadh. She reviewed marketing materials to ensure they wouldn't accidentally offend regional sensibilities. She even helped resolve a potentially explosive diplomatic incident when a mistranslation nearly derailed a $2 billion infrastructure deal. The work was intellectually stimulating, in a way Emma hadn't experienced since her MIT days. Her brain, dormant for so long, roared back to life with fierce joy. She worked 12-hour days and loved every minute of it. But more surprising than the work itself was her growing relationship with Sheikh Khalid. He was demanding, exacting, and had impossibly high standards, but he was also brilliant, surprisingly funny, and genuinely interested in her insights. They fell into a pattern of late-night working sessions in his townhouse office, discussing everything from geopolitical strategy to linguistic theory to the poetry of Rumi. Emma discovered that beneath his intimidating exterior, Khalid was a man of deep complexity. He had lost his wife Amira to cancer 5 years earlier, and the grief had hardened him, made him retreat into the cold comfort of power and control. He had 2 daughters studying at Oxford, whom he adored but rarely saw due to his relentless work schedule. He collected rare books, played chess at a master level, and had a weakness for American jazz music that seemed incongruous with his formal demeanor. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the dynamic between them began to shift from employer-employee to something more complicated. It was during their 4th week of working together that Marcus Webb re-entered Emma's life like a poison spreading through clean water. She was having lunch at a cafe near the Sheikh's Manhattan office when she saw him walk in with a group of well-dressed business associates. Her entire body went rigid. Marcus looked exactly as she remembered, tall, conventionally handsome, with sandy blonde hair and blue eyes, wearing an expensive suit and an expression of smug self-satisfaction. He was laughing at something one of his companions said, completely at ease in his stolen success. Emma tried to make herself small, to disappear into her corner booth, but it was too late. Marcus's gaze swept across the cafe and landed on her. His eyes widened in recognition, then narrowed with something that looked like contempt mixed with amusement. He excused himself from his group and walked directly to her table. "Emma Carter," he said, his voice dripping with false warmth. "I heard you were working as a waitress. I have to say, I'm surprised to see you in this neighborhood. Isn't it a bit upscale for your current circumstances?" Emma forced herself to meet his eyes, her hands clenched into fists beneath the table. "Hello, Marcus." He slid uninvited into the seat across from her, his smile sharp as a blade. "You know, I've often thought about you over the past 2 years, wondered what happened to you after you tried to destroy my reputation with those ridiculous accusations." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Did you really think anyone would believe that I stole your work? You were always brilliant at research, Emma, but you never understood how the real world works. It's not about who has the ideas, it's about who has the credibility to sell them." Rage boiled in Emma's chest, but she kept her voice level. "You stole 2 years of my research. You published my thesis under your name. You built your entire career on my work." Marcus laughed, a cold sound that made her skin crawl. "Prove it." "Oh, wait, you can't, because I made sure every piece of evidence pointed to me as the original author. Your name appears nowhere in the final documentation. As far as the academic world is concerned, you were just a research assistant who got bitter when she wasn't given enough credit." He stood up, smoothing his suit jacket. "Here's some advice, Emma. Stop living in the past. Accept that you lost and move on. Because if you ever try to come after me again, I'll destroy what little reputation you have left. I have lawyers, connections, and resources you can't even imagine." "You're a waitress." "I'm a celebrated innovator. Who do you think people will believe?" With that, he walked back to his table, leaving Emma shaking with fury and humiliation. She left the cafe immediately, her appetite gone, her mind racing. That evening, she told Sheikh Khalid everything. They were in his office, ostensibly reviewing contracts for a new venture in Oman, but Emma couldn't focus. The words poured out of her, the encounter with Marcus, his threats, the casual cruelty of his dismissal. When she finished, she was surprised to find tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping at her eyes. "This is unprofessional. I shouldn't burden you with my personal problems." Khalid was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he stood and walked around his desk to where she sat. To her surprise, he pulled a chair close to hers and sat down, his eyes level with hers. "Emma," he said quietly, "do you know why I really hired you?" She shook her head, not trusting her voice. "Yes, I needed your linguistic expertise. Yes, you're brilliant at what you do. But the real reason is that I saw myself in you that night at the restaurant. I saw someone who had been underestimated, dismissed, treated as if they were invisible. I've spent my entire life fighting against people who thought I was nothing more than an oil-rich Arab with more money than sense. I've had to prove myself 1,000 times over, and even now there are those who refuse to see my worth." He reached out and gently took her hand, the gesture so unexpected that Emma's breath caught. "You deserve justice, Emma, not just because what happened to you was wrong, but because the world deserves to benefit from your brilliance, and I'm going to help you get it." His voice hardened with determination. "Marcus Webb thinks he's untouchable. He thinks his connections and money make him invincible. But he's never faced someone like me. We're going to take him down, Emma. We're going to expose him for the fraud he is, and we're going to do it in a way that ensures he never works in academia or technology again." Emma looked into Khalid's eyes and saw fierce protectiveness there, mixed with something else she was afraid to name. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you go to such lengths for me?" Khalid's thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand, and when he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "Because in the past 5 years I've been dead inside. I've gone through the motions of living, building my empire, making deals, accumulating power, but I've felt nothing. Nothing until I met you. You've awakened something in me I thought was gone forever. You make me want to be more than just a ruthless businessman. You make me want to be a man worthy of your respect." The air between them crackled with tension. Emma knew she should pull away, maintain professional boundaries, protect her heart from another potential disaster. But she couldn't. She was drawn to this complicated, powerful man who saw her, truly saw her, in a way no one else ever had. "Khalid," she breathed, and the use of his first name felt intimate, forbidden. "This is dangerous. You're my employer. I'm still putting my life back together. I can't—" He released her hand and stood abruptly, putting distance between them. "You're right. I apologize." That was inappropriate. His voice was formal again, the walls slamming back into place. "Let's focus on the matter at hand. Marcus Webb. I'll have my team begin a comprehensive investigation. If there's evidence of his theft, we'll find it." But as Emma left his office that night, she couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted between them. The professional relationship they had carefully maintained was cracking, revealing something raw and real beneath. And she wasn't sure if that terrified her or thrilled her. Over the next 2 weeks, Sheikh Khalid's investigation team worked with surgical precision. They were led by a woman named Yasmin Al-Fasi, a former intelligence analyst who now ran a private security and investigation firm. Yasmin was in her 40s, sharp-eyed and sharper-minded, with a reputation for uncovering secrets that people desperately wanted to stay buried. Emma met with Yasmin multiple times, providing every detail she could remember about her time at MIT, her research process, her collaboration with Marcus, and the theft of her work. Yasmin listened with intense focus, taking notes and asking probing questions that sometimes made Emma uncomfortable but were clearly necessary. "The key," Yasmin explained during one of their sessions, "is finding the digital trail. Academic work leaves footprints, emails, file timestamps, revision histories, backup servers. Even if Marcus deleted or altered the obvious evidence, there are always traces. We just need to know where to look." She paused, studying Emma carefully. "But I need you to be prepared for what we might find. Sometimes investigations reveal uncomfortable truths. Are you absolutely certain that your version of events is accurate? Is there any possibility that your memory is colored by emotion, or that the situation was more ambiguous than you remember?" Emma met her gaze steadily. "I know what happened, Yasmin. Marcus and I worked together for 18 months. I developed the core algorithm for Arabic dialect translation. I wrote 90% of the thesis. I have notebooks, early drafts, and emails that prove my contributions. Marcus was supposed to be my partner, but he took everything and erased me from the narrative." Yasmin nodded slowly. "Then we'll find the proof. But Emma, you should know. Sheikh Khalid is personally invested in this case in a way I've never seen before. In the 15 years I've worked for him, he's always been coldly professional. But with you, there's something different, something personal. Be careful. Men like Khalid are dangerous when they care about something, because they'll stop at nothing to protect it." The warning lingered in Emma's mind long after the meeting ended. She knew Yasmin was right. She could feel the intensity of Khalid's focus on her case, the way his eyes tracked her movements when they were in the same room, the subtle protectiveness in his gestures. 3 days later, Yasmin called an emergency meeting. Emma arrived at Sheikh Khalid's townhouse to find both Yasmin and Khalid waiting in his office, their expressions grim. "We found something," Yasmin said without preamble. She opened her laptop and turned it toward Emma. "MIT maintains backup servers for all student and faculty work. They're supposed to be secure, but with the right access and expertise, we were able to retrieve deleted files from the period when you were working on your thesis." The screen showed a complex directory structure, but Yasmin navigated to a specific folder. "This is your original research folder from 3 years ago. Look at the file creation dates and modification histories." Emma leaned forward, her heart pounding. She saw her own files, early drafts of her thesis, algorithm code, research notes, all with timestamps that predated Marcus's published work by months. "This proves I created the original work," she breathed. Yasmin nodded. "It gets better. We also found email exchanges between Marcus Webb and a colleague at Columbia University. Look at this." She pulled up an email dated 6 months before Marcus published the thesis. Emma read the words on the screen and her blood ran cold. "I figured out how to take credit for Emma's work. She's too trusting, too naive to protect herself properly. By the time she realizes what's happening, it will be too late. The academic world will see me as the genius, and she'll be just another forgotten research assistant. I'm meeting with the patent lawyer next week to ensure all intellectual property rights are assigned to me." Emma's hands trembled as she scrolled through more emails, each one more damning than the last. Marcus had planned the theft meticulously. consulting with lawyers, manipulating documentation, and even planting false evidence to make it appear that Emma had been merely assisting his research, rather than leading it. "There's more," Yasmin continued, her voice hard. "We discovered that Marcus has been selling modified versions of your algorithm to various organizations, including some with questionable ethics. He's made over $12 million in the past 2 years from licensing deals alone. And some of his clients are using the technology for surveillance and censorship in authoritarian regimes." Sheikh Khalid, who had been silent until now, spoke with barely controlled fury. "He didn't just steal your work, Emma. He's profiting from it while it's being used to harm people. Your brilliant research, which could have been used for good, for breaking down language barriers, for fostering understanding between cultures, is instead being weaponized by dictators to monitor and control their populations." Emma felt sick. She had created that algorithm with pure intentions, wanting to help people communicate across linguistic and cultural divides. The thought that it was now being used for oppression was almost unbearable. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice small. Khalid's expression was fierce. "Now we destroy him. We take this evidence to MIT, to the academic journals that published his work, to the media and to law enforcement. We expose him not just as a thief, but as someone who has violated international laws regarding technology transfer and human rights. He'll lose everything: his position, his company, his reputation, his freedom." He turned to Emma, his eyes blazing with protective intensity. "But I need to know you're ready for this. Once we start, there's no going back. Marcus will fight with everything he has. It will be ugly, public, and painful. Are you prepared for that?" Emma thought about the past 2 years, the humiliation, the poverty, the loss of her dreams. She thought about Marcus's smug face in the cafe, his casual cruelty, his absolute certainty that he was untouchable. And she thought about the people suffering because her work was being misused. "I'm ready," she said firmly. "So let's take him down." Khalid smiled, and it was a predator's smile, full of dangerous promise. "Then let's begin." The plan was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its execution. Yasmin would compile all evidence into an irrefutable package. Sheikh Khalid would use his connections to ensure the right people saw it: university administrators, journal editors, technology ethics boards, and federal prosecutors. Emma would provide testimony and technical explanations, and they would coordinate the release of information to maximize impact and minimize Marcus's ability to spin the narrative. But they needed one more piece: a public confrontation that would force Marcus to reveal himself, and fate provided the perfect opportunity. 2 weeks later, Emma received an invitation to the International Technology and Innovation Conference in Dubai. It was one of the most prestigious events in the tech world, attended by thousands of industry leaders, academics, and innovators. And the keynote speaker, scheduled to receive the Emerging Innovator Award for his groundbreaking work in linguistic AI, was Dr. Marcus Webb. "This is perfect," Khalid said when Emma showed him the invitation. "Dubai is my territory. I'm one of the conference sponsors. We'll attend together, and we'll expose him on the biggest stage possible, in front of the entire international tech community." Emma's stomach churned with anxiety and anticipation. What if it doesn't work? What if people still don't believe me? Khalid took her hands in his touch warm and reassuring. "They'll believe you, Emma, because we have irrefutable evidence, because I'll be standing beside you, and because the truth has a power that lies can never match." He paused, his expression softening. "You're not alone anymore. You have me. You have my resources, my influence, and my complete support. Marcus Webb is about to learn what happens when you cross someone I care about." The word care hung in the air between them, loaded with unspoken meaning. Emma looked up into Khalid's dark eyes and saw something that made her breath catch, not just protectiveness or respect, but something deeper, more dangerous, more real. "Khalid," she whispered, "what's happening between us?" He released her hands and stepped back, his jaw tight. "Something that shouldn't be happening. Something that complicates everything. But I can't seem to stop it." His voice dropped to a rough whisper. "You've become important to me, Emma. More important than is wise or appropriate. And after we deal with Marcus, we're going to have to figure out what that means." Before Emma could respond, He turned and walked out of the room, leaving her standing alone with her heart racing and her mind spinning. The professional boundaries they had maintained were crumbling, and she wasn't sure if she wanted to rebuild them or let them fall completely. 1 week later, Emma and Sheikh Khalid boarded his private jet for the flight to Dubai. The aircraft was a flying palace, cream leather seats, polished wood accents, a full bedroom suite, and a staff of 4 attending to their every need. Emma tried not to be overwhelmed by the opulence, but it was impossible not to feel like she had stepped into a different world. During the 14-hour flight, they reviewed their strategy one final time. Yasmin had prepared a comprehensive presentation with all the evidence, file timestamps, emails, expert analysis, and testimony from Emma's former MIT professors who confirmed her role in the research. The plan was to attend Marcus's keynote speech, and immediately afterward, during the Q&A session, Emma would stand up and present the evidence publicly. Khalid had arranged for major tech journalists to be in attendance, and the entire session would be live-streamed to thousands of viewers worldwide. "He won't be able to run from this," Khalid said as they reviewed the final details. "The evidence is too strong, the audience too important, the platform too public. By the time we're done, everyone will know the truth." Emma nodded, trying to calm her nerves. "I'm scared," she admitted. "What if I freeze up there? What if I can't find the words?" Khalid reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "You won't freeze. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. You survived betrayal and rebuilt your life from nothing. You learned 7 languages and created revolutionary technology. You faced me in my own office and demanded justice. You have more courage than you realize, Emma Carter." His words steadied her, and she found herself smiling despite her anxiety. "When did you become so good at pep talks?" He smiled back, and the expression transformed his usually severe face into something almost boyish. "I have many hidden talents. You're just beginning to discover them." The moment felt intimate, suspended in time, and Emma found herself leaning slightly toward him, drawn by a force she couldn't name. Khalid's eyes darkened, his gaze dropping to her lips, and for a heartbeat she thought he might kiss her. But then he pulled back, clearing his throat and returning his attention to the documents spread across the table. "We should rest," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Tomorrow is going to be a long day." Emma nodded, disappointment and relief warring in her chest. She retreated to the bedroom suite, but sleep was impossible. Her mind kept replaying the moment, the almost kiss, the electricity that crackled between them. She was falling for Sheikh Khalid al-Rashid, and she had no idea if that was the bravest or most foolish thing she had ever done. They arrived in Dubai in the early morning, and Emma was immediately struck by the city's stunning contrast of ancient and modern. Gleaming skyscrapers pierced the sky while traditional souks bustled with life. The conference was being held at the Burj Al Arab, the iconic sail-shaped hotel that rose from the Persian Gulf like a monument to human ambition. Khalid had reserved the royal suite for them, separate bedrooms but a shared living space that was larger than Emma's entire former apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking views of the turquoise water and the city beyond. "This is too much," Emma protested as staff members unpacked their luggage and a butler explained the suite's amenities. Khalid dismissed her concern with a wave. "Nothing is too much. You're about to face one of the most difficult moments of your life. You deserve to do it from a position of strength and comfort." That evening, they attended the conference's opening reception. Emma wore a stunning midnight blue gown that Khalid had insisted on purchasing for her, elegant, sophisticated, and armor against her own insecurities. As they entered the grand ballroom, heads turned. Sheikh Khalid was well known in these circles, and his appearance with a beautiful woman on his arm sparked immediate interest and speculation. Emma felt the weight of curious gazes and whispered conversations, but Khalid's steady presence beside her kept her grounded. They mingled with tech leaders, academics, and innovators from around the world. Khalid introduced Emma as his senior linguistic consultant, and she found herself engaged in fascinating conversations about AI, language processing, and cross-cultural communication. For the first time in 2 years, she was being treated as an intellectual equal, her insights valued and respected. It was intoxicating. And then she saw him. Marcus Webb stood across the ballroom, surrounded by admirers, holding court like a celebrity. He wore a custom tuxedo and an expression of supreme confidence. He hadn't seen her yet, and Emma felt a moment of savage satisfaction knowing that his world was about to implode. As if sensing her gaze, Marcus looked up. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and Emma watched his expression cycle through recognition, confusion, and then something like fear. He excused himself from his group and began walking toward them, his stride purposeful, but his eyes wary. "This should be interesting," Khalid murmured beside her. "Remember, you have nothing to fear from him." "Not anymore." Marcus stopped in front of them, his smile forced. "Emma, what a surprise to see you here. I didn't realize waitresses attended international tech conferences." His tone was mocking. But Emma detected an undercurrent of nervousness. Before Emma could respond, Khalid stepped forward slightly, his body language subtly protective. "Dr. Webb, I presume. I'm Sheikh Khalid al-Rashid. Miss Carter is my senior linguistic consultant and one of the most brilliant minds in computational linguistics. Perhaps you're familiar with her work." The emphasis on her work was deliberate, and Marcus's eyes narrowed. "I'm not sure what you're referring to. Emma was a research assistant on one of my projects years ago, but she didn't contribute anything significant." The lie was so blatant, so casually delivered, that Emma felt rage surge through her. "That's not true. And you know it," she said, her voice steady despite the fury burning in her chest. "I created the algorithm. I wrote the thesis. You stole my work and destroyed my reputation." Marcus laughed, but it sounded hollow. "Still telling that story? Emma, you need to let go of this delusion. No one believes you. No one ever will." Khalid's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Actually, Dr. Webb, quite a few people are about to believe her. Tomorrow, during your keynote speech, Miss Carter will be presenting evidence that proves beyond any doubt that you committed academic fraud, intellectual property theft, and several violations of international technology transfer laws." The color drained from Marcus's face. "You're bluffing. There's no evidence because nothing happened. Emma is a bitter ex who can't accept that I'm more successful than she'll ever be." Khalid smiled, and it was terrifying. "We'll see about that tomorrow. I suggest you enjoy your evening, Dr. Webb. It's the last one you'll have as a celebrated innovator. By this time tomorrow, you'll be known as a fraud and a thief, and I'll personally ensure that you face every legal consequence available." Marcus's composure cracked. "Who the hell do you think you are? You can't just—" "I'm Sheikh Khalid al-Rashid," Khalid interrupted, his voice soft but laced with steel. "I own half of this city. I'm a primary sponsor of this conference. I have connections that span 40 countries and reach into the highest levels of government, academia, and business. And I've decided that destroying you is worth my time and resources. So yes, Dr. Webb, I absolutely can." Marcus looked between them, his face pale and his hands trembling slightly. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, his confident stride replaced by something that looked almost like flight. Emma released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. That was intense. Khalid turned to her, his expression softening. "Are you all right?" She nodded, surprised to find that she was. "Actually, yes. For the first time in 2 years, I feel like I have power, like I'm not a victim anymore." Khalid's eyes held hers, and the intensity in them made her heart race. "You were never a victim, Emma. You were a survivor waiting for the right moment to fight back. Tomorrow you take back everything he stole from you." That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of her bedroom, looking out at the glittering lights of Dubai, her mind racing through everything that would happen tomorrow. Around midnight, she heard a soft knock on her door. "Emma," Khalid's voice was quiet. "Are you awake?" She opened the door to find him standing there in dark pajama pants and a white t-shirt, looking more human and less like an untouchable billionaire than she'd ever seen him. "I couldn't sleep either," he admitted. "I wanted to make sure you were okay." Emma stepped back, inviting him in. They sat together on the sofa near the window, the city lights casting soft shadows across their faces. "I'm terrified," Emma confessed. "What if something goes wrong? What if people still don't believe me?" Khalid turned to face her, his expression earnest. "Then we'll keep fighting until they do." "But Emma, you need to understand something. Regardless of what happens tomorrow, you've already won. How?" she asked, her voice breaking slightly. "I haven't gotten justice yet. Marcus is still celebrated while I'm still nobody." Khalid reached out and gently cupped her face, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "You're not nobody. You're extraordinary. You survived betrayal that would have destroyed most people. You rebuilt your life with dignity and grace. You never compromised your integrity, even when it would have been easier to give up. That's not weakness, Emma. That's strength beyond measure." His words broke something open inside her, and suddenly she was crying, not delicate tears but deep, wrenching sobs that came from 2 years of suppressed pain and fear. Khalid pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly while she cried into his chest. He didn't try to stop her tears or offer empty platitudes. He just held her, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring soft words in Arabic that she understood meant, "You're safe. I've got you. You're not alone." When her tears finally subsided, Emma pulled back slightly, embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I got your shirt all wet." Khalid smiled gently. "I have 100 shirts. I only have one you." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning. Emma looked up into his eyes and saw everything she'd been afraid to acknowledge: desire, tenderness, protectiveness, and something deeper that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "Khalid," she whispered. "We shouldn't—" "I know," he interrupted softly. "You work for me. The power dynamic is complicated. The timing is terrible. There are 1,000 reasons why this is a bad idea. But," Emma prompted, her heart hammering, "but I'm falling in love with you," Khalid said simply. "I've been falling since the moment you froze in my restaurant, your face betraying that brilliant mind for just 2 seconds. I've been falling every day since, watching you come back to life, seeing your confidence return, witnessing your strength and grace and extraordinary intelligence. And I can't pretend anymore that this is just professional respect or protective instinct. It's more. It's everything." Emma's breath caught. No one had ever spoken to her like this, with such raw honesty, such vulnerability. "I'm falling for you too," she admitted, "and it terrifies me. I trusted Marcus and he destroyed me." "How do I know?" "You don't," Khalid interrupted gently. "You can't know. Love requires trust and trust requires risk. But Emma, I swear to you on everything I hold sacred, I will never betray you. I will never use your trust against you. I will protect you, support you, and stand beside you for as long as you'll let me." He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away, but Emma didn't move. When his lips met hers, it was gentle at first, a question, a promise, a beginning. Then Emma's hands tangled in his hair, and the kiss deepened, 2 years of loneliness and longing pouring into the connection between them. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Khalid rested his forehead against hers. "After tomorrow," he said quietly, "after we deal with Marcus and you get your justice, we'll figure out what this means. We'll do it right. No rushing, no pressure, just honest exploration of what we could be together. Does that sound acceptable?" Emma smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. "That sounds perfect." They sat together for another hour, talking quietly about everything and nothing, until exhaustion finally claimed them both. Khalid walked Emma back to her bedroom door, pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead and whispered, "Tomorrow you show the world who you really are, and I'll be right there beside you." The next day arrived with the weight of destiny. Emma dressed carefully in a tailored navy suit that projected confidence and professionalism. Khalid met her in the suite's living room, looking devastatingly handsome in a charcoal suit, and the heat in his eyes when he saw her made her blush. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm. Emma took it, drawing strength from his solid presence. "Ready?" The conference center was packed with over 2,000 attendees. Marcus's keynote speech was scheduled for 10 o'clock in the grand ballroom, and by 9:30, every seat was filled. Emma and Khalid sat in the 3rd row, close enough to see Marcus's face clearly. Yasmin sat 2 rows behind them, ready to provide technical support if needed. At exactly 10 o'clock, the lights dimmed and Marcus Webb walked onto the stage to enthusiastic applause. He looked confident, polished, every inch the celebrated innovator. His presentation was slick and professional, filled with impressive graphics and technical details about his groundbreaking work in linguistic AI. Emma watched him take credit for her ideas, her algorithms, her sleepless nights and brilliant insights, and felt a cold fury settle over her. When Marcus reached the section about the revolutionary dialect translation algorithm, Emma's hands clenched into fists. Khalid placed his hand over hers, a silent reminder that justice was coming. Marcus's speech lasted 45 minutes, and when he finished, the audience erupted in applause. The moderator, a distinguished professor from Stanford, stepped forward to begin the Q&A session. "We have time for several questions," she announced. "Please raise your hand if you'd like to ask Dr. Webb something." Emma's hand shot up. The moderator scanned the audience and pointed to her. "Yes, the woman in the navy suit. Please stand and state your name and affiliation." Emma stood, her legs steady despite her racing heart. Khalid stood beside her, a silent pillar of support. "My name is Emma Carter. I was a doctoral student at MIT 3 years ago, and I'm currently Senior Linguistic Consultant for Al Rashid Global Enterprises." She paused, letting her credentials sink in. "Dr. Webb, I have a question about the dialect translation algorithm you just presented. Can you explain the mathematical basis for the neural network architecture you claim to have developed?" Marcus's smile faltered slightly. "That's a rather technical question for a general audience." Emma's voice was clear and strong. "I'm sure someone of your expertise can explain it simply. After all, you developed it, didn't you?" The audience was silent, sensing tension. Marcus cleared his throat. "The architecture is based on recursive neural networks with attention mechanisms that—" "That's incorrect," Emma interrupted. "The architecture I developed uses a hybrid approach combining transformer models with custom-built phonetic mapping layers specific to Arabic morphology. Would you like me to explain how it actually works?" The room erupted in murmurs. Marcus's face flushed red. "I don't know who you think you are, but I'm the person who actually created that algorithm," Emma said, her voice ringing through the ballroom. "I'm the person whose work you stole, whose thesis you published under your name, whose career you destroyed. And I have proof." Khalid stepped forward, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Sheikh Khalid al-Rashid, and I'm one of the primary sponsors of this conference. What you're about to see is evidence of systematic academic fraud and intellectual property theft." He nodded to Yasmin, who had moved to the technical booth. Suddenly, the large screens behind Marcus filled with documents, emails, file timestamps, code comparisons, and testimony from MIT professors. Emma's voice was steady as she walked the audience through each piece of evidence, explaining in clear terms how Marcus had stolen her work, manipulated documentation, and built his career on her ideas. The audience watched in stunned silence as the case unfolded before them. Marcus tried to interrupt several times, but the moderator, now clearly disturbed by what she was seeing, asked him to remain silent until the presentation was complete. When Emma finished, she looked directly at Marcus. "You told me 2 weeks ago that no one would ever believe me. You said you had connections and resources I couldn't imagine. But you underestimated 2 things, Dr. Webb. You underestimated the power of truth, and you underestimated what happens when someone with real resources decides to stand up for justice." The ballroom exploded with noise, journalists shouting questions, attendees arguing, conference organizers rushing toward the stage. Marcus stood frozen, his face ashen, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. Security personnel approached him, and Emma heard someone mention that federal prosecutors were already on site. Having been alerted by Khalid's legal team, Marcus would be facing criminal charges for fraud, intellectual property theft, and violations of technology transfer laws. As Marcus was escorted from the stage, he looked at Emma one final time. The arrogance was gone, replaced by defeat and something that might have been regret. But Emma felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only a profound sense of relief that the truth was finally known. The aftermath was chaotic but ultimately vindicating. Within hours, major tech publications were running stories about the scandal. MIT announced an immediate investigation and suspended Marcus's credentials. His company's board voted to remove him as CEO. The organizations that had licensed his technology began demanding refunds and threatening lawsuits. Emma spent the rest of the day giving interviews, explaining her research, and fielding offers from universities and tech companies around the world. By evening, she was exhausted but exhilarated. She had done it. She had taken back her life, her work, her reputation. Everything Marcus had stolen was being returned to her, and more. That night, Khalid took her to dinner at a private restaurant overlooking the Persian Gulf. They sat on a terrace under the stars, the warm breeze carrying the scent of jasmine and salt water. "How do you feel?" Khalid asked, studying her face in the candlelight. Emma considered the question. "Free," she said finally. "For 2 years I've been carrying this weight, the injustice, the anger, the shame, and now it's gone. I'm free." Khalid reached across the table and took her hand. "You were magnificent today. Watching you stand up there, presenting your case with such clarity and strength. I've never been more proud of anyone in my life." Emma smiled, squeezing his hand. "I couldn't have done it without you. You gave me the resources, the support, the courage to fight back. You believed in me when I'd stopped believing in myself." "I'll always believe in you," Khalid said quietly. "Emma, I meant what I said last night. I'm in love with you. And now that the Marcus situation is resolved, I want to explore what we could be together. But I need you to know, I'm not asking you to be my employee who I'm dating. If you want this, if you want us, then we need to restructure our professional relationship. I'll help you establish your own consulting firm or support whatever career path you choose. But I won't have the power dynamic of employer-employee complicating what we have." Emma's heart swelled with emotion. Even now, even when she was vulnerable and grateful, Khalid was thinking about her autonomy, her independence, her power. "What if I want to keep working with you?" she asked. "What if I like what we've built professionally?" Khalid smiled. "Then we make you a partner, not an employee. Equal footing, equal say, equal power. I won't have you with me because you feel obligated or because I control your livelihood. I want you with me because you choose me, freely and completely." Emma stood and walked around the table. Khalid rose to meet her, and she placed her hands on his chest, feeling his heart beating strong and steady beneath her palms. "I choose you," she said simply, "not because of your money or your power or what you can do for me. I choose you because you see me, the real me, not the broken version or the brilliant version, but all of me. I choose you because you make me want to be brave. I choose you because when I'm with you I feel like I'm finally home." Khalid's arms came around her, pulling her close. "Ya Hayati," he murmured in Arabic, "my life. You've awakened my heart after years of darkness. I was merely existing before you, going through the motions of living without truly feeling anything. You've given me back my humanity, my capacity for joy and hope and love. I will spend the rest of my life proving myself worthy of your trust." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, a promise and a beginning. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Emma laughed with pure joy. "So what happens now?" Khalid smiled, his usually severe features transformed by happiness. "Now we build a life together. You establish yourself as the brilliant innovator you've always been. I support you in whatever you want to achieve. We navigate the complexities of a cross-cultural relationship. We probably scandalize my more conservative relatives and shock your friends. And we do it all together, as partners in every sense of the word." Emma rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "That sounds perfect." 6 months later, Emma stood in a conference room at MIT presenting her latest research to a packed audience of academics, tech leaders, and journalists. She wore a tailored suit and an expression of quiet confidence. Her new company, Carter Linguistics AI, had just secured $50 million in Series A funding and was partnering with major tech firms to develop ethical, transparent language translation technology. The algorithms she had created were being used to break down communication barriers, facilitate international diplomacy, and help refugees navigate new countries. Her work was finally being used for good, exactly as she had always intended. In the back of the room, Sheikh Khalid al-Rashid watched with undisguised pride. He had kept his promise. Emma's company was entirely her own, though his venture capital firm had been one of the early investors. They had structured their professional relationship as equals, with Emma consulting on his Middle Eastern business ventures while maintaining complete independence in her own work. Their personal relationship had deepened over the months, navigating the complexities of their different backgrounds with patience, humor, and deep love. When Emma finished her presentation to thunderous applause, she looked directly at Khalid. He smiled and mouthed words in Arabic that she now understood perfectly. "Ana bahibek, I love you." She smiled back, her heart full. After the presentation, Emma was surrounded by well-wishers and potential collaborators. She handled each conversation with grace and intelligence, the shy waitress completely transformed into a confident leader. When the crowd finally dispersed, Khalid approached her carrying a small velvet box. "Walk with me?" he asked, offering his arm. They strolled through the MIT campus, past the buildings where Emma had once studied and dreamed. Khalid led her to a quiet courtyard with a fountain and flowering trees. "Emma," he said, taking both her hands in his, 6 months ago you stood in a ballroom in Dubai and reclaimed your life. You showed the world your brilliance, your courage, your integrity. And every day since, I've watched you build something extraordinary, not just a company, but a legacy of ethical innovation and positive impact." He dropped to one knee, and Emma's breath caught. "You've taught me that true power isn't about wealth or influence. It's about character, compassion, and the courage to stand up for what's right. You've shown me that love isn't a weakness, but the greatest strength of all. Emma Carter, will you marry me? Will you build a life with me as my partner, my equal, my love?" Tears streamed down Emma's face as she nodded. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Khalid slipped a stunning ring onto her finger, a deep blue sapphire surrounded by diamonds, the color of the dress she had worn the first night he told her he was falling in love with her. They kissed in the courtyard where Emma had once walked as a student, full of dreams that had been stolen and then reclaimed. The story of the waitress who understood Arabic and the Sheikh who laughed at her mistake spread far beyond the tech world. It became a symbol of justice delayed but not denied, of the power of truth over deception, of love that transcends class and culture. Emma's company thrived, her research won international awards, and she became a sought-after speaker on ethics in AI and the importance of protecting intellectual property. Marcus Webb, meanwhile, faced the consequences of his actions. He was convicted of fraud and sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. His company collapsed, his academic credentials were permanently revoked, and his reputation was destroyed beyond repair. But Emma took no joy in his downfall. She had moved beyond revenge to something more powerful, the satisfaction of building something meaningful from the ashes of betrayal. 1 year after their engagement, Emma and Khalid were married in a beautiful ceremony that blended American and Middle Eastern traditions. Emma wore a stunning white gown with delicate Arabic calligraphy embroidered along the hem. The words love, justice, truth in elegant script. The wedding was attended by tech leaders, diplomats, academics, and family from both sides. Khalid's daughters, who had initially been skeptical of their father's American fiancé, had grown to love Emma for her intelligence, kindness, and the way she made their father smile again. Emma's parents, who had supported her through the darkest times, cried tears of joy as they watched their daughter marry a man who clearly adored her. During the reception, Khalid gave a speech that left not a dry eye in the room. "I was taught from a young age that power comes from wealth, influence, and control," he said, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "But Emma taught me that true power comes from integrity, courage, and the willingness to fight for what's right even when the odds seem impossible." He turned to his bride, his eyes shining with emotion. "You walked into my restaurant as a waitress, invisible to most of the world. But I saw you, truly saw you. In the moment you understood my words and your face betrayed your brilliant mind. In that instant you went from invisible to unforgettable. And every day since, you've shown me what it means to be truly extraordinary. You are my partner, my equal, my inspiration, and my love. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for teaching me to feel again. Thank you for being exactly who you are." Emma stood and kissed him, and the room erupted in applause. As they danced their first dance as husband and wife, Emma reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her here. From the depths of betrayal and loss to the heights of love and success, she had traveled a path she never could have imagined. She had learned that justice sometimes requires patience, that love can come from unexpected places, and that true strength lies not in never falling, but in rising every time you're knocked down. Years later, when Emma told their story to her students, she had accepted a professorship at MIT. Finally returning to academia on her own terms, she always emphasized one crucial lesson. "The world will try to make you invisible," she would say. "It will try to steal your voice, your work, your dreams. But you have a choice. You can accept that invisibility, or you can stand up and demand to be seen. It won't be easy. It will require courage, resilience, and sometimes the help of people who believe in you. But it's worth it, because you deserve to be seen for who you truly are. And in the back of the lecture hall, Sheikh Khalid al-Rashid would sometimes sit, listening to his wife inspire the next generation of innovators. He would think about the night he laughed at a waitress's mispronunciation, never imagining that she would change his life forever. He would remember the moment her face betrayed her understanding, freezing his entire world and setting in motion a chain of events that brought them together. And he would smile, grateful beyond measure that he had been given the gift of seeing Emma Carter, truly seeing her, when the rest of the world had tried to make her invisible. Their love story became legendary, but to Emma and Khalid it was simply their truth. A truth built on justice reclaimed, love discovered, and two people who found in each other the courage to be fully, authentically themselves.